If you've ever believed that some endings are too painful to survive, stay with me until the very end of this story, because what begins as a divorce inside a cold courtroom ends as a reminder that life can still surprise us in the most fragile moments. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes one story is all it takes to change the way we see love, loss, and forgiveness. She walked into the courthouse with steady steps, but every breath felt heavy, as if the air itself was pressing against her chest. The smell of old files and polished floors mixed with the distant echo of footsteps, and for a moment she wondered how a place designed to deliver justice could feel so indifferent to pain. In her hand was a thin folder, divorce papers finalized, signatures ready. 7 months pregnant, she told herself silently, 7 months and still standing. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, promising herself she would not cry, not here, not in front of him. What she didn't know was that he had already been sitting inside the courtroom, staring at the empty bench ahead, unaware that the woman about to walk in carried a truth that would stop his world. Just hours earlier, she had been in a clinic across town, sitting on a narrow examination bed while a doctor gently pressed an ultrasound device against her stomach. The rhythmic sound of a heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady, and for a brief moment her fear softened into awe. The doctor smiled and said everything looked normal, that the baby was healthy. She nodded, forcing a smile back, though her eyes burned. She had come alone, as she had for most appointments, because explaining her situation always led to uncomfortable silence. Married, but separated. Pregnant, but divorcing. Loved once, but not anymore, or at least that's what she kept telling herself. As she left the clinic, clutching the ultrasound image, she folded it carefully and placed it deep inside her bag, unsure whether it was meant to be seen by anyone else ever again. He, on the other hand, had arrived at the courthouse early, driven by a mix of anger and exhaustion. The past year had drained him in ways he never expected. Arguments that started small had grown into walls neither of them knew how to climb. Silence had replaced laughter, and pride had replaced patience. When she asked for the divorce months ago, he agreed too quickly, convincing himself that walking away was easier than fighting for something already broken. He told himself they had no future, no shared path left. He didn't know she was pregnant. Or maybe, deep down, he never asked because he was afraid of the answer. When she entered the courtroom, he looked up casually at first, then froze. Time seemed to slow as his eyes traveled from her face to the gentle curve beneath her coat. His breath caught, his heart thudding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. 7 months. It didn't take a doctor to tell him that. His hands tightened into fists, confusion and shock battling guilt in his chest. She avoided his eyes, focusing instead on the judge's desk, her jaw clenched as if holding herself together by sheer will. The judge spoke calmly, explaining procedures, rights, and final confirmations, but the words blurred into noise. All he could see was her, and all she could feel was the weight of his gaze. When the judge finally asked if there was anything either party wished to say before proceeding, silence filled the room. She shook her head slightly, signaling no. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, fear choking his voice. The judge nodded and announced a short recess due to a scheduling issue, giving them a few minutes outside. In the hallway, the tension finally cracked. He stepped toward her, his voice low and unsteady, asking why she hadn't told him. She laughed bitterly, a sound that surprised even herself, and asked when he would have listened. She reminded him of the nights she cried alone, of the clinic visits she attended without support, of the messages left unanswered. She told him she wasn't there for explanations anymore, only closure. Her strength wavered, though, when a sudden wave of dizziness forced her to lean against the wall. Without thinking, he reached out to steady her, his hand hovering awkwardly near her arm before gently touching it. That moment changed everything. The anger drained from his face, replaced by fear, not of losing a marriage but of losing them. He insisted on taking her back to the clinic, ignoring her protests until another sharp pain made her wince. The doctor examined her again, concern creasing his brow, explaining that stress was causing complications and that she needed rest and support. The word, support, lingered in the air like an accusation. He stood there, silent, absorbing the weight of what he had failed to be. They sat together in the clinic waiting room afterward, the same place where she had once sat alone. The walls were pale, the chairs uncomfortable, but something between them softened. He apologized, not with dramatic promises, but with quiet honesty. He admitted his mistakes, his fear of responsibility, his inability to communicate. She listened, guarded but tired, realizing that carrying resentment had exhausted her more than she wanted to admit. She didn't forgive him instantly. She didn't promise anything, but for the first time in months, she allowed him to walk beside her. Back in court, the judge noticed the change immediately. The distance between them was smaller now, their body language less rigid. When asked again if they wished to proceed, she hesitated. Her hand rested instinctively on her stomach, feeling a gentle kick as if the baby sensed the uncertainty. She looked at him, searching his face for truth, not desperation. He met her gaze, nodding slightly, as if to say he would accept whatever decision she made. She spoke then, her voice calm but emotional, asking for time, not to save the marriage magically, but to make a choice without fear and anger clouding her judgment. The judge agreed, postponing the finalization and advising counseling and legal reconsideration. The gavel struck softly, and just like that, the ending she thought was inevitable was no longer certain. Outside the courthouse, sunlight warmed their faces. It felt symbolic, almost cliché, but neither of them denied the relief it brought. They didn't hold hands. They didn't embrace. Instead, they walked slowly, side by side, toward the clinic parking lot where the next chapter would begin with doctor visits, conversations, and uncomfortable truths. Healing, they both realized, wasn't a sudden miracle, it was a series of small, brave steps. Months later, in that same clinic, he stood beside her as she held their newborn for the first time. Tears streamed freely down his face, and she didn't stop her own. They were not perfect, not magically healed, but they were present, and sometimes presence is the most powerful form of love. The court papers remained unsigned, tucked away like a reminder of how close they came to losing everything. This story isn't about fairy tale endings, it's about second chances earned through humility, communication, and courage. It's about understanding that sometimes life places us in courtrooms and clinics not to punish us but to wake us up. If this story moved you even a little, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, because you never know which story might remind someone to listen, to stay, or to fight a little harder before it's too late.